Hook winced. "Aye," he said. "That is the fear that haunts me." He was roused from this dejection by Smee's eager voice. "Captain," said Smee, "could we not kidnap these boys, mother, and make her our mother?" "It is a princely scheme," cried Hook, and at once it took practical shape in his great brain. "We will seize the children and carry them to the boat, and the boys will make walk to the plank, and Wendy shall be our mother." Again Wendy forgot herself. "Never!" she cried, and bobbed. What was that? But they could see nothing. They thought it must have been but a leaf in the wind. "Do you agree, my bullies?" asked Hook. "There's my hand on it," they both said. "And there's my hook. Swear." They all swore, but by this time they were on the rock, and suddenly Hook remembered Tiger Lily. "Where's the redskin?" he demanded abruptly. He had a playful humor at moments, and they thought this was one of the moments. "That's all right, Captain," Smee answered complacently. "We let her go." "Let her go!" cried Hook. "'Twas your own orders." The boss faltered. "You called over the water to let us have her let go," said Starkey. "Brimstone and gall," thundered Hook. "What cozening is here?" His face had gone black with rage, but he saw that they believed their words, and he was startled. "Lads," he said, shaking a little, "I gave no such order." "It's a passing thought," Smee said, and they all fidgeted uncomfortably. Hook raised his voice, but there was a quiver in it. "Spirit that haunts this dark lagoon tonight," he cried, "dost hear me?" Of course Peter should have kept quiet, but of course he did not. He immediately answered in Hook's voice. "Odds bobs, hammer and tongues, I hear you." In that supreme moment, Hook did not blanch, even at the gills, but Smee and Starkey clung to each other in terror. "Who are you, stranger? Speak," Hook demanded. "I am James Hook," replied the voice, "captain of the Jolly Roger." You are not, Hook cried hoarsely. "Brimstone and gall," the voice retorted. "Say that again, and I'll cast anchor in you." Hook tried a more ingratiating manner. "If you are Hook," he said almost humbly, "come tell me, who am I?" "A codfish," replied the voice, "only a codfish." "A codfish!" Hook echoed blankly, and it was then, but not till then, that his proud spirit broke. He saw his men draw back from him. "Have we been captured all this time by a codfish?" they muttered. "It is lowering to our pride." They were his dogs snapping at him, but tragic figure though he had become, he scarcely heeded them. Against such fearful evidence it was not their belief in him that he needed, it was his own. He felt his ego slipping from him. "Don't desert me, bully," he whispered hoarsely to it. In the dark nature there was a touch of the feminine, as in all the great pirates, and it sometimes gave him intuitions. Suddenly he tried the guessing game. "Hook," he called, "have you another voice?" Now Peter could never resist a game, and he answered blithely in his own voice, "I have." "And another name?" "Aye, aye." "Vegetable?" asked Hook. "Mineral?" "No." "Animal?" "Yes." "Man?" "No." This answer rang out scornfully. "Boy?" "Yes." "Ordinary boy?" "No." "Wonderful boy?" To Wendy's pain, the answer that rang out this time was yes. "Are you in England?" "No." "Are you here?" "Yes." Hook was completely puzzled. "You ask him some questions," he said to the others, wiping his damp brow. Smee reflected. "I can't think of a thing," he said regretfully. Can't guess," crowed Peter. "Do you give it up?" Of course in his pride he was carrying the game too far, and the miscreants saw their chance. Yes, they answered eagerly. "Well then," he cried, "I'm Peter Pan." Pan! In a moment Hook was himself again, and Smee and Starkey were his faithful henchmen. "Now we have him," Hook shouted. "Into the water, Smee! Starkey, mind the boat! Take him dead or alive!" He leaped as he spoke, and simultaneously came the happy voice of Peter. "Are you ready, boys?" "Aye, aye," from various parts of the lagoon. "Then lam into the pirates!" The fight was short and sharp. First to draw blood was John, who gallantly climbed into the boat and held Starkey. There was a fierce struggle. in which the cutlass was torn from the pirate's grasp. He wriggled overboard, and John leapt after him. The dinghy drifted away. Here and there a head bobbed in the water, and there was a flash of steel, followed by a cry or a whoop. In the confusion, some struck at their own side. The corkscrew of Smee got Toodles in the fourth rib, but he was himself pinked in turn by Curly. Farther from the rock, Starkey was pressing slightly, and the twins hard. Where all this time was Peter? He was seeking bigger game. The others were all brave boys, and they must not be blamed for backing from the pirate captain. His iron claw made a circle of dead water around him, from which they fled like affrighted fishes. But there was one who did not fear him. There was one prepared to enter that circle. Strangely, it was not in the water that they met. Hook rose to the rock to breathe, and at the same moment Peter scaled in on the opposite side. The rock was slippery as a ball, and they had to crawl rather than climb. Neither knew that the other was coming. Each feeling for a grip met the other's arm. In surprise they raised their heads. Their faces were almost touching, so they met. Some of the greatest heroes have confessed that just before they fell, too, they had a sinking. Had it been so with Peter at that moment, I would admit it. After all, this was the only man that the sea cook had feared. But Peter had no sinking. He had one feeling only, gladness, and he gnashed his pretty teeth with joy. Quick as thought, he snatched a knife from Hook's belt and was about to drive it home when he saw that he was higher up the rock than his foe. It would not have been fighting fair. He gave the pirate a hand to help him up. It was then that Hook bit him. Not the pain of this, but its unfairness was what dazed Peter. It made him quite helpless. He could only stare, horrified. Every child is affected thus the first time he is treated unfairly. All he thinks he has a right to when he comes to you to be yours is fairness. After you have been unfair to him, he will love you again. But he will never afterwards be quite the same boy. No one ever gets over the first unfairness. No one except Peter. He often met it, but he always forgot it. I suppose that was the real difference between him and all the rest. So when he met it now, it was like the first time, and he could just stare, helpless. Twice the iron hand clawed him. A few minutes afterwards, the other boys saw Hook in the water, striking wildly for the ship. No elation on his pestilent face now, only white fear, for the crocodile was in dog pursuit of him. On ordinary occasions, the boys would have swum alongside cheering, but now they were uneasy, for they had lost both Peter and Wendy and were scouring the lagoon for them, calling them by name. They found the dinghy and went home in it, and shouting, "Peter, Wendy," as they went, but no answer came, gave mocking laughter from the mermaids. They must be swimming back or flying, the boys concluded. They were not very anxious. They had such faith in Peter. They chuckled, boy-like, because they would be late for bed, and it was all Mother Wendy's fault. When their voices died away, there came cold silence over the lagoon, and then a feeble cry. "Help! Help!" Two small figures were beating against the rock. The girl had fainted and lay on the boy's arm. With a last effort, Peter pulled her up on the rock, and then lay down beside her. Even as he also fainted, he saw that the water was rising. He knew that they would soon be drowned, but he could do no more. As they lay side by side, a mermaid caught Wendy by the feet and began pulling her softly into the water. Peter, feeling her slip from him, woke with a start and was just in time to draw her back. But he had to tell her the truth. "We're on the rock, Wendy," he said, "but it's growing smaller. Soon the water will be over it." She did not understand, even now. "We must go," she said almost brightly. "Yes," he answered faintly. "Shall we swim or fly, Peter?" He had to tell her. "Do you think you could swim or fly as far as the island, Wendy, without my help?" She had to admit that she was too tired. He moaned. "What is it?" she asked, anxious about him at once. "I can't help you, Wendy. Hook wounded me. I can neither fly nor swim." "Do you mean we shall both be drowned?" "Look how the water is rising." They put their hands over their eyes to shut out the sight. They thought they would soon be no more. As they sat thus, something brushed against Peter as light as a kiss, and stayed there, as if saying timidly, "Can I be of any use?" It was the tail of a kite, which Peter had made some days before. It had torn itself out of his hand and floated away. Michael's kite, Peter said without interest. But next moment he had seized the tail and was pulling the kite towards him. It lifted Michael off the ground, he cried. Why should it not carry you? Both of us. It can't lift two. Michael and Curly tried. Let us draw lots, Wendy said bravely. And you a lady? Never. Already he had tied the tail round her. She clung to him. She refused to go without him. But with a goodbye, Wendy, he pushed her from the rock, and in a few minutes she was borne out of his sight. Peter was alone on the lagoon. The rock was very small now. Soon it would be submerged. Pale rays of light tiptoed across the waters, and by there was to be heard a sound at once the most musical and the most melancholy in the world, the mermaids calling to the moon. Peter was not quite like other boys, but he was afraid at last. A tremor ran through him, like a shudder passing over the sea. But on the sea one shudder follows another till there are hundreds of them, and Peter felt just the one. Next moment he was standing straight up on the rock again, with that smile on his face and the drum beating within him. It was saying, to die will be an awfully big adventure. Alright, so that was a crazy intense chapter. We haven't really gotten anything about Hook and Peter Pan together, so that was an epic battle. I hope you guys enjoyed that. If you have any questions, let me know. But I have one thing that you guys can think about. Just think, how do you think Peter has sort of changed throughout the course of from when we started reading? He was very pessimistic, always against kind of what Wendy and the others were saying, and now he's sort of looking after them and doing the right thing. So think of something else you might think that something he's changed, and I'd love to hear about it.